The truth is, I never saw myself as the kind of woman who would do such a thing. If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have laughed, a clear, confident sound, and said my marriage was solid. A little weathered, maybe, but built on a foundation of 15 years. David was my David, reliable, steady, a good man. He was an architect, a creator of beautiful, functional spaces, and he brought that same quiet order to our lives. He remembered to take the recycling out every Thursday. He always filled up my car with gas when he used it, and he made a mean lasagna. But somewhere along the line, the functionality had overshadowed the beauty, and the quiet had become a silence I didn't know how to fill. It started with a loneliness that felt like a physical ache, a hollow space right under my ribcage. David and I would sit at the same dinner table, talk about our days, his projects, my work at the art gallery, our daughter Chloe's school play. But it was like we were reading from separate scripts. The intimacy, the shared glances that held entire conversations, the simple act of touching his hand as he passed me a cup of coffee. It had all faded into a comfortable yet desperate routine. Then there was Mark. He came into the gallery one Tuesday afternoon, all easy smiles and bright eyes. He was a collector, he said, new to the city and drawn to the vibrancy of our local artists. He had a way of looking at you, a focused intensity that made you feel like you were the most fascinating person in the world. He looked at me that way. He asked my opinion, not just as a gallery manager, but as a woman. What did I feel when I looked at that abstract piece? What music did it remind me of? It was intoxicating. The affair wasn't sordid. It wasn't seedy motel or frantic, guilty couplings. In my mind, it was a romance. It was long lunches that stretched into hours, whispered conversations in quiet corners of cafes, and the thrill of a new text message lighting up my phone. With Mark, I felt seen. I felt interesting. The hollow space inside me began to fill with his attention, his laughter, his stories of traveling the world. I told myself I was just filling a void, that I wasn't hurting anyone. David was so wrapped up in his work, I convinced myself he wouldn't even notice. I became an expert in deception. I invented late meetings at the gallery, weekend workshops, a new book club. David would just nod, his eyes on his blueprints or his laptop, and say, "That's nice, honey. Have fun." I should have known. I should have seen the signs. David was an architect. His entire world was about structure, support, and noticing the slightest stress fracture before it became a catastrophic failure. The change in me was a seismic shift in the foundation of his life. And he noticed. He just didn't say anything. The first crack in my perfect secret world appeared on a Thursday. I came home late, my cheeks flushed from wine and the thrill of an afternoon with Mark. The house was quiet. David was in his study, as usual, but on the kitchen counter, next to the fruit bowl, was a single, long-stemmed red rose. My heart stopped. It wasn't our anniversary. It wasn't my birthday. Had he found out? Was this some sort of romantic, desperate gesture to win me back? I picked it up, my fingers trembling. There was no note. "David," I called out, my voice unnaturally high. He came out of his study, wearing his reading glasses, a pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked at me, then at the rose in my hand. "Oh, that," he said, his tone flat. The client from the Henderson project sent a bouquet to the office as a thank you. There was one for each of the team leads. I brought you one. He gave a small, dismissive shrug and went back into his study. The relief was so profound it made me dizzy. Of course, a practical gift, a leftover of a professional gesture. That was my David, but a tiny, nagging part of me wondered why he'd bothered to bring home just one. Why not the whole bouquet? A week later, my phone, the secret one I kept from Mark, died while we were at lunch. I'd forgotten my charger. Panic set in. David sometimes checked my personal phone if he couldn't find his. What if he tried to call me? What if he needed to know something about Chloe? I rushed home, concocting a story about my main phone dying and leaving my charger at the gallery. David was in the living room building a complicated Lego set with Chloe. "No problem," he said calmly when I explained my flustered state. "I figured you were busy. I got the information about Chloe's dentist appointment from the calendar on the fridge." He smiled at me, a normal, domestic smile. But his eyes, for a fleeting second, they looked like they were analyzing me, measuring the dimensions of my lie. Then, the emails started. Not to me, but for me. David began signing me up for things. A weekend pottery class, a lecture series on Renaissance art, a volunteer program at the local library. "I thought you'd enjoy it," he'd say. "You're always saying you want to find a new passion." It was so unlike him. The David I knew didn't proactively plan my personal enrichment. He supported my endeavors, but he didn't initiate them. These activities, however, had one thing in common. They were all during times I usually saw Mark. I had to cancel on him twice, concocting excuses about family obligations, my stomach churning with guilt and frustration. The masterpiece of his subtle campaign, though, was the family project. Out of the blue, David announced he was building a treehouse for Chloe. Not just any treehouse, but a miniature, breathtaking architectural wonder, complete with a wraparound porch, shuttered windows, and a little copper weather vane on top. It was a project that consumed his every spare moment, and he wanted my help. "Come on, Sarah," he'd say, his voice gentle but firm. "You have a better eye for color than I do. Help me choose the stain. Hold this board steady. Chloe would love it if her mom was involved." It was genius. He was pulling me back into the fabric of our family with the one thread I couldn't snap: our daughter's joy. I found myself spending my stolen afternoons, not with Mark, but in our backyard, my hands covered in sawdust, the scent of fresh-cut pine filling the air. I'd look at David, concentrating on driving a nail, his brow furrowed, and I'd feel a pang of something sharp and painful. It wasn't just guilt. It was a memory of us, years ago, building a bookshelf for our first apartment together. We'd been a team then. Mark grew impatient. "You're always busy now," he complained over the phone, his voice tight. "Is there something wrong? Is it your husband? Did he find out?" No, of course not," I whispered, hiding in the laundry room. "It's just a busy time, family stuff." "It feels like you're pulling away, Sarah."
And the line went dead. That was the moment the bubble began to burst. The fantasy I had been living in, the romantic escape, started to feel flimsy and cheap compared to the solid, tangible reality of the treehouse taking shape in my own backyard, of my daughter's delighted face, of my husband's quiet, persistent presence. David wasn't fighting me. He wasn't accusing me. He was rebuilding. And he was doing it without me even realizing I was holding the hammer. The revenge had begun, and I was too wrapped up in my own trauma to even see it. He wasn't trying to catch me. He was making me catch myself. The treehouse was nearly finished, a charming little castle nestled in the old oak tree, and it felt like a monument to everything I was betraying. Every board we nailed, every coat of stain we brushed on, was another layer of shame painted directly onto my heart. David was different during those hours. He wasn't the quiet, distracted husband I'd grown accustomed to. He was present, talking about his design choices, asking for my opinion on the placement of a flower box, his hand occasionally brushing against mine as we passed the tool. It was a calculated nostalgia, and it was working. The tension with Mark was becoming a constant humming wire in the back of my mind. Our calls grew shorter, more strained. He could sense my distance, and his charming patience was wearing thin, revealing a petulant edge I'd never seen before. "I don't understand, Sarah," he'd say, his voice sharp. "You say you're unhappy, but you're always playing happy families in your backyard. Make a choice." A choice? The word terrified me. It meant blowing up my life, hurting Chloe, facing David's quiet, devastating disappointment. The fantasy of Mark was safe precisely because it was a secret. Forcing it into the light made it look tawdry and cheap. It was a Friday evening when David unveiled the next phase of his silent campaign. We were cleaning up after dinner, a comfortable silence between us that now felt charged with everything unsaid. "I was thinking," he began, wiping a plate with methodical care, "we should take a trip, just the two of us. Chloe can stay with my mom." I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. A trip? We hadn't taken a trip, just the two of us, in years. A trip? Where? When? "Next weekend. I've already booked it," he said, his tone casual, as if he'd just ordered a pizza. "It's a surprise. A little inn up in the mountains. I thought we could use some time to reconnect." My mind raced. Next weekend, I was supposed to meet Mark. He'd booked a suite at a boutique hotel in the city. A proper date, he'd called it. A chance for us to be a real couple for a whole night. I had already concocted a story about a gallery event running late, maybe even an overnight stay, if the wine flowed enough. "David, I might have a work thing that weekend," I stammered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. He stopped wiping the plate and looked at me. Really looked at me. His gaze was calm, but there was a depth to it, an unnerving stillness. "Cancel it," he said, and it wasn't a suggestion. It was the firmest, most direct order he had given me in a decade. This is more important. The following days were agony. I had to call Mart and tell him. His reaction was worse than I feared. "You're canceling for a family trip?" he sneered. "I see. So that's how it is. When it comes down to it, you'll always choose the safe, boring option. You're not the brave woman I thought you were, Sarah. You're just comfortable." His words hit their mark with brutal accuracy. He was right. I was a coward. I was trying to have both, and in doing so, I was proving myself unworthy of either. The glamorous, exciting life with Mark was a mirage, and his true colors were now showing. He wanted a mistress, not a partner with baggage and a family. The trip arrived. David drove, and the silence in the car was heavy with my guilt. I kept waiting for him to say something, to accuse me, to scream, to cry, but he just drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his knee, perfectly composed. He played soft jazz on the radio,
The very music we used to listen to when we first started dating. The inn was beautiful. A rustic, chic lodge overlooking a serene, glassy lake. It was the kind of place we would have loved years ago. Our room had a stone fireplace and a large balcony. It was achingly romantic. "I'll get the bags," David said, his voice soft. "Why don't you relax on the balcony? The view is supposed to be spectacular." I stepped outside, the crisp mountain air doing little to clear the fog of my anxiety. I felt like I was waiting for the executioner's axe to fall. When David joined me, he didn't bring the bags. He held 2 glasses of wine and handed one to me. "To us," he said, clinking his glass against mine. His eyes held my and in them I saw no anger, no hurt. I saw something far more terrifying. Complete and utter knowledge. "David, I began, the confession bubbling up, desperate to be set free. He held up a hand. "Don't, Sarah. Not yet." He took a slow sip of his wine. "I want you to listen first. I want you to understand." He leaned against the balcony railing, looking out at the lake so calm and still. "About 3 months ago, I noticed a change in you. You had a new light in your eyes, a new energy. But it wasn't for me. It was for someone else." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if he were describing a crack in a foundation. At first, I was angry, devastated. I thought about confronting you, screaming, throwing things. But what would that have accomplished? It would have given you a reason to leave. It would have made me the villain, the angry, unreasonable husband. He turned to look at me, and a small, sad smile touched my lips. "I am an architect, Sarah. I don't demolish things out of rage. I assess the damage, I shore up the supports, and I rebuild." So, that's what I decided to do. I decided to rebuild us. And to do that, I had to make you see the value of what you were so carelessly ready to throw away. My legs felt weak. I sank into a chair, the wine glass trembling in my hand. "The rose, a test to see if you felt guilty. You did. Your reaction was pure panic. The emails, the pottery class, the treehouse, reinforcement pulling you back into your life, our life, reminding you of your responsibilities and, more importantly, of your joys, making it harder for you to see him, making you choose over and over again between a fantasy and your reality." Tears streamed down my face, hot and shameful. He had known. He had known everything. And he had not been passive. He had been fighting for me with a quiet, brilliant strategy I was too blind to see. "And this trip?" I asked, my voice a broken whisper. "This trip," he said, his voice dropping, becoming colder, "is the final phase. This is where you understand the full extent of my revenge." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times and then held it out to me. On the screen was an email sent to Mark's professional address. The subject line was "Read your professional inquiry." "Read it," David said, his voice flat. With trembling fingers, I took the phone. The email was from David. "Dear Mark, thank you for your interest in the senior curator position at the Modern Art Institute in Singapore. We were very impressed with your credentials and your vision. However, after a thorough review process, we have decided to withdraw our offer of employment. During our final background checks, we received some concerning information regarding your professional ethics and personal integrity. The board feels that these issues are not aligned with the values of our institution. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. Sincerely, David Harrington, Chairman of the Board, Modern Arts Institute. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. Singapore, a job offer. Withdrawn. I looked up at David, utterly bewildered. I don't understand. What is this? You're not on any board. A slow, cold smile spread across David's face, a smile I had never seen before. It was the smile of a man who had checkmated his opponent without them even realizing they were in a game. I'm not, he said calmly, but Mark doesn't know that. The Modern Art Institute in Singapore is real. The job opening was real. He applied for it months ago, was thrilled to get an interview, and was even more thrilled when he received a tentative offer. The entire hiring process for the last 8 weeks has been conducted by me. The world tilted on its axis. What? I created an email domain, a near-perfect replica of the Institute's. I had a friend, a voice actor, play the part of the headhunter on the phone. I conducted the final interview myself using a voice modulator. I offered him his dream job, Sarah, a career-defining role on the other side of the world. He took his phone back, his eyes never leaving mine. He was going to take it. He was going to leave in a month. He was probably going to ask you to go with him, and you would have had to choose. But now, David said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Now, he has nothing, no job, no future in that career path, because I will be ensuring a very detailed and very discreet letter about his unethical conduct finds its way to every major gallery and institute in the country. And most importantly, he doesn't have you. I was speechless. The sheer skill, the patience, the brilliance of his revenge was breathtaking. He hadn't laid a hand on me or on Mark. He had not screamed or begged. He had systematically dismantled the affair from the inside out. He had exposed Mark's fickleness. He had reminded me of my family. And he had utterly destroyed Mark's future, all without ever raising his voice. He called you comfortable and safe, David said, his voice now laced with a steel I didn't know he possessed. But he was the one who was chasing security, a fancy title, a fat paycheck. He was using you, Sarah, as a distraction, as an ego boost. And now, he has nothing. That is my revenge on him. He stepped closer, looming over me where I sat, shattered. And my revenge on you, he said, his voice soft again, but no less terrible, is that you have to live with what you did. You have to live with the knowledge that I know, that I saw every lie, every secret phone call, every moment you stole from our family. You have to look at me every day and see the man you betrayed, and the man who was smart enough and cared enough to fight for you in a way you never expected. You don't get the dramatic exit. You don't get to be the tragic heroine of a romance. You get to stay. You get to live in the life you almost destroyed, and you get to help me rebuild it. That is your punishment. And mine. He turned and walked back into the room, leaving me alone on the balcony with the ruins of my affair, the crushing weight of my guilt, and the terrifying, awe-inspiring realization of the man I had married. The revenge was complete. It was cleaner, colder, and more absolute than any crime of passion could ever be. He had not just won me back. He had held up a mirror and forced me to watch as the woman I thought I was, the woman I had become, shattered into a million pieces. We came home from the mountains, and the silence in our house was no longer empty. It was full of everything that now stood between us. David didn't gloat. He didn't punish me with words. His revenge was in his quiet competence and the way he continued to build a life I was now merely occupying, a guest in my own home. I told Mark it was over in a brief, tearless phone call. His furious, sputtering response only confirmed everything David had said. He was a hollow man, and I had filled him with my own foolish dreams. Now, we exist. We are parents to Chloe. We are partners in household chores. The treehouse stands in the backyard, a beautiful, haunted monument. I look at David and I see the architect who didn't demolish, but who rebuilt on the cracked foundation of my betrayal. The love isn't gone, but it is different now, hardened by truth. His revenge was not to make me leave, but to make me stay, and to forever remember the cost of the silence I broke. I live with my punishment, the profound daily understanding of the good man I underestimated, and the terrible price of being truly, completely known.